Hello everyone, this is Cheeseburg. Today I'll be starting my journey into the world of Goodnight Pun Pun. This series will be a volume by volume breakdown. Disclaimer for everyone, I'm a broke college student and I do not have access to the official translation. In Japan, Pun Pun was released in 13 volumes, while in English it was produced in 7 volumes. The website I'm using breaks it down into 13 volumes, so this will be a 13 video series. With that being said, please support the official release. Once I get paid, I'll be buying the box set, hopefully in time to complete this series. Also, just so you guys know, I have read the first volume of Goodnight Pun Pun before. I only got a couple chapters into volume 2, and it's been months since that point. So I don't remember too much, but just so everybody knows, after this first volume, I'll pretty much be blind. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is a chapter I remember quite well. I love the introspection from the narrator, who I'm assuming is Pun Pun from the future, as well as how deep the conversation between Pun Pun and Aiko get. Showing these kids are super smart and have some understanding of the world, and although they are still very naive, which I love because as someone who works with kids, they're extremely smart, and I see that in my day-to-day life, and a lot of people don't understand how wise these children can be, especially at such young ages. But I also love the characterization of Pun Pun. He is relatable, partially as a child and partially as a young boy, which we'll see more in later volumes and chapters, especially with his lack of understanding of his emotions. I remember how taken aback I was the first time I read this chapter and got to the part where Pun Pun's dad freaks out at his mom. It's a very blunt and sudden tone shift, as we can see reflected in the art. However, the way this is introduced is genius. It just happens. Pun Pun pays no mind to it, and it seems to be a relatively low impact moment, especially when it says Pun Pun is used to this. I think this is masterfully written, especially considering how it's coming from Pun Pun's point of view. It's treated as normal because the Pun Pun is normal. Most likely every day he has to deal with this, which is solidified when he talks to God. My thoughts on God on this story are relatively positive. I like the comedic yet kind of existential vibe he gives off. I'm not really sure if this is God or a figment of Pun Pun's imagination. Regardless, as of now, I know him entirely as a separate character from Pun Pun. However, God is kind of a dick. Telling Pun Pun he's tired of hearing about his mom and dad, also telling him how life is full of endless possibilities and he shouldn't worry about the future. The following line is, "If you tell this to a child, you're a monster." As a future educator and a current educator, I disagree with this. At least with me as a kid, I would have liked to hear that. I always had people pressuring me to make that decision. And I know for a lot of kids, a lot of the kids I talk to, it can be very overwhelming. Now, just so you guys know, this is where the scripted portion of the video ends. I'm just going to be giving my thoughts on the rest of chapter 1, and then I'm going to keep recording bits as I finish chapter to chapter. Because I'm really lazy and I don't want to write a 12-page script for this video. But it's been like a day or two since I've read this, but if my memory serves me correct, after this is when Pun Pun's dad goes to his room with a telescope and Pun Pun decides he wants to be an astronaut. And I think this is such a beautiful moment, especially as someone who's had quite a tough relationship with my father. It shows that it's like, even though these people are hurting you, hurting each other, they still love you and care for you, and they want the best for you regardless of how it seems in the moment. And I love how soft Pun Pun's dad gets around him. But this unfortunately takes us to the next turn of events when Pun Pun comes home and supposedly a robber broke into his house and his mother died. As we all know, it wasn't really a robber, it was Pun Pun's dad, and I'm a little sad thinking about this, and this is only chapter 1. But it's unfortunate and it's really sad. And I've read the rest of this volume before, so I know that his uncle's going to come in and step in and be a better role model for Pun Pun. But it's really unfortunate to see a boy like this going through so much, especially at his young age. But that concludes my thoughts on chapter 1. I'll be back at you in just a couple of minutes with chapter 2. Chapter 2. Alright guys, so I just finished reading chapter 2. Excuse me. And I want to clear up something I said in the last chapter. Pun Pun's dad did not kill his mom. Like I said, I've read this, but I don't remember a lot of it, so my bad. This chapter was just more of like an introductory chapter, mainly to Uncle, what's his name? Uncle Yuichi. My bad. So like he's come to take care of Pun Pun. He's currently unemployed. He's a very good character from what I remember. I really liked him. And throughout this chapter, number one, we hear Yuichi say, "It's a shame. I know your dad's a good man at heart," which like is really heartbreaking and like also really crazy. Like I have a sister, and I knew if a man beat my sister unconscious, I would not have the audacity to be saying he's a good man at heart. But Yuichi seems like a wise and strong man, as far as I can tell. And Pun Pun went to school, and he seems quite unaffected by what happened. Although we got to assume he is affected. He's a little kid. His dad just went to jail, and his mom's in the hospital. That's got to take a toll on someone. When it comes to sharing his dream, first he doesn't say he has his homework, and the teacher flips out. And I wonder, because like this seems to be something like a pattern we see in the series, at least so far. I could be very wrong, but it's almost like he, what's the word, exaggerates the reactions of the adults in the series to what he thinks they're really thinking, to how they're really feeling, and making them a lot more transparent and emotional than we would expect our normal adults to be. While the children in this series stay very adult, very focused, and seem more adult than the teachers and the other adults, which I think is kind of to play on how you view people as a kid. You feel grown up, especially around Pun Pun's age. Like I don't think they stated his age, but I'm assuming he's like fourth, fifth grade. It's like at this point in life, you feel like you got your stuff together. You feel like you know what's up, and obviously you don't. But you feel like the adults are kind of crazy compared to you. Now, throughout the chapter, we have the vice principal and principal playing rock, paper, scissors. I don't really know what that's about. Like, it just confuses me. The teacher, one thing I see, the teacher wrote love in cursive on the back of the board before Pun Pun reads his essay. I don't know why he wrote love, but he did. And as Pun Pun said in the last chapter, Pun Pun's dream is to be a space scientist and to help humanity colonize the stars. But he got scared. He thought those aspirations were too big. He couldn't handle being laughed at, especially by Aiko or in front of Aiko. So he just said he wanted to be an everyday businessman, and he ran away from his problems, which is a typical reaction, especially of a kid. They don't know how to process their emotions. He's probably feeling a lot, regardless of the essay, and he's probably very overwhelmed. And then we cut to his friends talking about how do we help Pun Pun? How do we cheer him up? Like my mom said his dad went to jail and is a suspect of assault, blah, blah, blah. And like, again, this is very similar to how it is in real life. Something bad will happen to someone. Parents will kind of figure out. Parents will tell their kids, be nice to this person because such and such happened. Or like make sure to be like extra nice to them because whatever happened, right? Parents tend to do that. And one of the kids says, why don't we just act normal? Which I personally think is one of the greatest things you can do for someone who is in mourning or like in a time of trauma of any kind, whether it's a breakup, whether it's actual mourning, losing a friend, whether it's because like they actually lost them or just circumstances like ended that friendship. The best thing to do is to act normal and to act like nothing changed and to be as inclusive and as kind to the person as you were before. Because if you act like something changed, then like at least in my experience, it's like kind of bizarre and it takes away from the authenticity of the situation. But one of the kids asks, what even was normal? Which is a very fair reaction to be feeling in the situation. Like, regardless of it's this situation or like another situation that affects your mental state, if people act like it's not normal, it makes it hard to feel like you're being treated normally. But a lot of times people forget, how were we normally treating this person before this tragedy, before this experience happened? And I just really like how adult this is and how they tend to process these emotions very simply as a little kid would, but the undertones of what they're saying really mean so much more. That's about all I have to say for chapter 2. I'm going to get on to chapter 3 very soon. I'll be back in just a few minutes to record that. Alright, guys, so I just finished chapter 3. Beautiful chapter. We pick up right where we left off with Pun Pun ruminating in like the storage room or storage closet or whatever we want to call it. Aiko comes and finds him and kind of roasts him to death, really throws a bunch of strays at him, being like, Pun Pun, you're a coward, like you should just let them say what they say. It's okay to have a dream. All that stuff. And Pun Pun ends up holding hands with Aiko as she takes him out of the room. And Pun Pun is like having an epiphany. He sees God. He sees the Big Bang. He sees life on Earth get created. He sees the Egyptians, I think. He sees people getting hung. He sees Einstein. He sees the first person in space. He sees all of Tokyo from above. And all he knows is he doesn't want to let go of Aiko's hand. And Pun Pun, the absolute Riz God, says, I might not be able to rescue everyone from extinction. Yeah? But at the very least, I want to save you from that fate. And you can tell that hit Aiko. Even 8-year-old Aiko, Pun Pun got that Riz. And Aiko asks why. And Pun Pun, being a stupid little boy, says, because I love you. And Aiko kisses him, calls him a naughty boy, which is crazy. And then they go back to class, and it's music class, and they start singing a song about spreading your wings to the sky and flying away from sadness and flying up into the sky. And as that's happening, we see Pun Pun's uncle talking to the school board principal, whatever, saying, sorry for the trouble, blah, blah, blah. And the principal's like, sorry for the trouble? Like, what do you mean? You guys are going through way more trouble than me. And Uncle Yuichi says a very wise thing, like, everyone has their troubles, but we can't get away from it, or something like that. I'm really not going to go back and find that quote right now. But as they go throughout the day, we figure out that Pun Pun and the boys are going to have a porno party at one of the boys' houses, which is like, what else is a slightly pubescent boy to do with his free time with his boys? You know, understandable. But we cut back to the music class, and they're still singing about flying away from sadness and whatever. And this leads to to a big, like, existential thought that Pun Pun has, which is he wants to end up with Aiko. Or he felt that he might be fated to end up with Aiko. Which, again, I've read this first volume. I know what happens at the beginning of volume 2. And I'm not going to say it until I get there. But sometimes it's not always that way. And as someone who was once a young boy, this is a feeling that we have probably once all felt. And it's a painful feeling, especially when it doesn't end up the way you want it to. But that sums up my thoughts on Chapter 3. I'll be right back with my thoughts on Chapter 4, and I'll see y'all in a minute. Alright, guys, so I just finished Chapter 4. It was a pretty low-consequence chapter. We get to see Pun Pun visiting his mom in the hospital. And she is not too thrilled to see him. And, like, the first thing we would expect from this is like, oh, damn, her brain injury probably affected her more. Like, she's probably really messed up from the attack. But then we cut to the nurses talking to Pun Pun and Uncle Yuichi. And they're saying, she's so lively, she gets bored, she wants more food, blah, blah, blah. But she didn't seem like that to Pun Pun or Yuichi. And Yuichi says, true, she's a moody person. So it's like Yuichi's kind of, like, excusing that behavior. But Pun Pun's saying he does not really like his mother. All she did was bug him about doing his homework, brushing his teeth, taking his bath, cleaning his room, and on and on. Pun Pun hoped she wouldn't be coming home quite yet. And then they go to the ramen shop, and we have this scene between a family and a grandpa and everything. And I'm not really sure what the purpose of this scene was, but if I had to guess, it's just to show a functioning family dynamic in front of Pun Pun and Yuichi, who Yuichi at the time is Pun Pun's caretaker, and Pun Pun is not in a very good family situation. And we see all the protection charms that the grandpa got for his granddaughter, grandson, soon to be born. And I think this is part of the say it's like Pun Pun never got any of that, you know? But they get out of the ramen restaurant, and Pun Pun asks Uncle Yuichi when his dad's gonna come home. And Uncle Yuichi says, I don't really have an answer. And Uncle Yuichi's really good at handling the situation, especially with Pun Pun. Because he knows that his father was probably in the wrong, definitely in the wrong. He knocked his wife unconscious. But he doesn't want to villainize Pun Pun's father to him, which I think is a very grown-up thing to do in this situation. And this is when Pun Pun asks Uncle Yuichi, who told him about saying, Dear God, tinkle tinkle hoy, is like that magic spell to talk to God. Uncle Yuichi has obviously forgotten that he told Pun Pun that, and he just gives Pun Pun his allowance and kind of forgets it. And then Yuichi has this very introspective line of saying, God, huh? Did God create man, or did man create God? I don't really care either way. Oh well. Humans are just... No. I should stop right there. And then there's a woman next to Yuichi who says, I know what you mean. Oh, I sure do, honey. Which is surprising, because it kind of looked like these were thoughts Yuichi was having, not words. But I'm not going to dig into that too much. And then Pun Pun's eating his popsicle on his way home, and he got a You Win popsicle stick. And that's where the chapter ends. We're going to pick up on part 5 right after this, and I'll see y'all in just 1 minute. Alright guys, I just finished chapter 5. This chapter starts off with the boys going over to Shimizu's house, the other boy's house, to have a fat party, you know, as you do. Kind of crazy, but, you know, everyone's been there before, am I right or am I right? And then Shizuzu's like, not today. Sorry, excuse me. My parents are coming home. I don't feel good, blah, blah, blah. So he's kind of pussying out. And then these guys are like, I doubt he even had a porno. Like, come on, brother. Like, he said he could do a Kamehameha. Like, that's not true. And then I made him show me he could do a Kamehameha. And he couldn't. And then he cried. Like, some pretty typical elementary school stuff. And then the boys spend as much time as they can looking for porno mags on the street, and they finally find one. And they're looking at it when the girls come up to them, and they're like, you guys better not be doing something gross, blah, blah, and Aiko's there, and Pun Pun's like, oh my goodness, it's my senpai, bro, fucking, I don't know. He loves Aiko, and he's super excited to see her. And he's excited, and he's like, we're not doing anything gross, and they're all like, we're not doing anything gross, and like the boys and girls are feuding, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. And then Aiko asks, you wouldn't lie, would you, Pun Pun? And then it goes to the boys doing some shenanigans. And then it goes back to Pun Pun being home with Uncle Yuichi doing fondue, whatever. And then Pun Pun is in his room, thinking about the images he saw in that magazine, thinking about Aiko, which is kind of cursed because she's an 11-year-old girl, but you know, I was 11 once too. And he also sees God while doing this. And he has a transcendent experience while twisting the snake, bro. Like, you can see him ascending. You can see Uncle Yuichi hearing it from downstairs, bro. Which is crazy that they went to that much detail of Pun Pun jacking it. And that's the end of the chapter. Kind of awkward, but you got to see Pun Pun jack it, which is funny. And I know next chapter we're going to get one of the most beautifully comedic lines in the whole series, so I can't wait to cover that in this review. And that's about all I have to say for Chapter 5. I'll see y'all in Chapter 6. Alright guys, I just finished Chapter 6. So I'm going to read the opening to this chapter word for word. And Pun Pun understood. A piece of my brain just shot out of my wiener. Which, I don't know about y'all, but that is one of the best lines in any anime and manga I've ever heard. Pun Pun proceeds to ask Uncle Yuichi for some medical encyclopedias because he thinks his brain just melted out of his wiener. Which, fair reaction. But he tells Pun Pun, he tells Uncle Yuichi what he did, and Yuichi gives him some books, and Pun Pun learns about anatomy and stuff, and whatever. And Pun Pun sees vagina aliens, and kind of scares him a little bit. But then he looks out the telescope his dad gave him, and he saw a moving star that was probably just a satellite. And he asks Uncle Yuichi, "Do you think that's a new star I discovered?" And Yuichi takes a minute and says, "Yeah, this could be a great discovery. If it's a new star, we'll have to call it Punpunia." Which is, really cute, but, obviously feeding into Pun Pun's delusions. And Pun Pun says, "Do you think I could win a Nobel Prize?" "Well, aren't you greedy?" says Uncle Yuichi. And Pun Pun starts daydreaming. Think about all the stuff he could do with his Nobel Prize with Punpunia. And how he could colonize it and share it with Aiko. And all the stuff he can do. And he's like, "I need to tell Dad and Aiko about this." And then he goes to school, and he can't really talk to Aiko. He's finding it really hard to talk to Aiko. And then finally, one of the boys asks out a girl at the end of the chapter, and that's where the chapter ends. Sorry that these past couple of chapters have been just kind of recaps. There's not a ton of narrative importance going on here, and I promise at the end of these 12 chapters, I'll give a cohesive collection of thoughts on all 12 volumes as a collective. Not volumes, all 12 chapters as a collective. But with that being said, that is it for chapter 6, and I'll get on to chapter 7. I'll see y'all in 1 minute. Alright guys, I just finished chapter 7, and basically in this chapter, Pun Pun, this person who asked out the other girl, they talk about it, and one of the kids says, "If you like each other, you go out." To Pun Pun's ears, this was such a radical, fresh, modern concept. Which I think is kind of capsulizes sometimes when you hear stuff as a kid. Your mind just explodes. It's you never thought of that before. You never even, especially in Pun Pun's situation where I bet his mom and dad rarely, if not ever, went out. He never has seen a functional relationship. And this was something to him that he just never understood. But he's like, "What does going out mean?" And he's like, "Oh, it must mean sex." And then Pun Pun passes out because he's afraid of sex. And then he goes to the nurse's office, and he's laying there, and the nurse walks away. And then Aiko crawls up in the bed with him. And they start talking, and Aiko's like, "I fell on purpose so I could be with you." And he's like, "You've been avoiding me, Pun Pun, huh?" And she's like, "No." And then she's like, "I'll believe you then." And then you could tell Aiko is maybe a little manipulative. I don't know if she really is, but that's kind of the way she's seeming when she says, "Well, you did say that you'd do anything to take care of me, didn't you? Do you love me?" And Pun Pun's like, "Yeah, of course." But obviously I don't think it's being manipulative for ill intent. I think children tend to just be manipulative little creatures, but we'll see how Aiko's character develops as time goes on. But then Aiko says, "Then I love you too." And this destroys Pun Pun. We see Pun Pun get put into a King Crimson sort of effect, spiraling down. Maybe when Ed and Al opened the doors of truth in Full Metal Alchemist, almost that level of reaction to hearing Aiko say he loves her. And then Aiko's that one boy and that girl, they're going to the park and blah, blah, blah. But she's like, "I want to go on a vacation far away from here. But I'm not jealous as long as you're still here because you love me, don't you? You'll love me forever and ever. And you'll never think about anything but my own happiness, right?" And Pun Pun's like, "Yeah." Which, kind of solidifies the fact that Aiko's a little bit manipulative. That's a crazy thought to have even as a 10-year-old. You only got to think about my happiness. That's kind of wild. And then Pun Pun's like, "Yeah." And then she's like, "If you're lying, you're going to get it." And Pun Pun's thinking, wondering just how long forever and ever meant to Aiko put Pun Pun into a truly indescribable state of mind. He was terrified. But then the boys start talking about that girl, and the girl dumped the guy, and he's like, I hate women, I'm just gonna watch porn forever. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. And they have a porno DVD, it looks like, and that's where the chapter ends. So I'll be with you right back with chapter 8 in 1 second. Alright, guys, so I just finished chapter 8. This chapter, Pun Pun and the boys finally watch their porno video. It starts off about, as you would expect, they're enjoying it, you know. And then right as your pants start to come down, a recording pops up. And it's a guy saying he killed his family, talking about happiness, talking about waiting for happiness, and his dad's second life, starting in retirement just to figure out he got diagnosed with cancer. And you can tell this man is very mentally ill. And the boys obviously don't understand the magnitude of the situation, and like this crazy guy starts dancing around, and like as a comedic moment, the boys start dancing with him, but it's almost like the guy can see them. He says, "No, damn it, you're not supposed to dance with me." And he says, "Look, I can't take it anymore. By exposing this crime to the world, I want to ask everyone just truly what happiness is. I've hidden all 3 bodies in the old unused miso factory on the outskirts of the K-Town Drive. There's also an amount of cash equivalent to the courage to find it. So I want you to find their bodies and tell the media. By the time you've seen this video, I will have left and will be behind, departed from this world. I'm expecting much of your courage and curiosity." And then the porno video resumes. And the boys are like, "Oh, we got pranked, blah, blah, blah." And they stop watching it. And then and then Uncle Yuichi comes back with a video, and they start doing the I don't understand dance. And that's where the chapter ends. I think in the next chapter is when they're going to start talking about exploring that miso mill. Because if I remember correctly, that's about where this volume ends, when they finish exploring that mill. But I'm going to get to chapter 9, and I'll see if those predictions are correct. Alright, guys, I just finished chapter 8. So in this chapter, we first see like a water saleswoman come to Pun Pun's door trying to sell them water, and Yuichi isn't having it, and she's like kind of insulting Yuichi, saying he doesn't have faith, and saying he's unhappy, and they need to pray for his happiness. And Pun Pun wants to ask God, when's Dad coming home? And God, in this story, again, kind of a prick, says, "Go ask Uncle Yuichi." And Pun Pun makes it just in time to hear Yuichi going off on this lady, and he gets there just in time to hear Yuichi say, "There is no God." And this hits Pun Pun hard, because he heard Yuichi's the one who taught him the "Hey God, tinkle tinkle hoy" chant that summons God. So if God isn't real, and Yuichi doesn't think God is real, then why would have Yuichi taught him this? I imagine it only sparks a collection of thoughts for Pun Pun. But before Pun Pun can process that, he sees with the lady, there's Aiko. And I think Aiko, well, I know Aiko, as she says in later chapters, but I'm going to act like I'm blind. She's very embarrassed about this moment, about Pun Pun seeing her with, I think it's her mother, who's the saleswoman. And that's where I might have said chapter 8, but that's where chapter 9 ends. I'm sorry if I said 8. I'll get to chapter 10, and we only have a few more chapters left of this review, so hopefully you guys stick it out. Alright guys, I just finished chapter 10. As I suspected, Aiko is very embarrassed by this and runs away, and Pun Pun chases her. Until Aiko falls down a flight of stairs and like bumps into this dude, and this dude's being a big dickwad about it, saying like, I can sue you, whatever. And all Aiko can say is, "You lied. You said your house was in the other direction when we walked together." And you can tell that she's very hurt about this. And all Pun Pun can do is follow her. And she keeps going off on him and saying, "I bet you think it's weird that my mom's like that, blah, blah, blah." And Pun Pun's like, "No." And Aiko's like, "I'm not going to believe you anymore. I can't take it. I hate this. Bye-bye." And this guy's like following Aiko, and Pun Pun's following Aiko. And then she asks, why are they following her? And I can't tell if this is Pun Pun or the other guy saying that he's going to his uncle's house in Kagoshima. I'm pretty sure it's the other guy. But then Pun Pun yells, "I'm gonna win a Nobel Prize!" And all Aiko can say is, "Are you retarded?" And then it says, when Aiko said this, Pun Pun realized that he probably was retarded. And God shows up and says, "Aren't you going to chase her?" And Pun Pun just kind of stands there. And God says, "Well, that's okay. It's what God likes about you, Pun Pun." Plop, with a drop of an apple and a tear going down Pun Pun's face. And then we get this beautiful, I assume it's a double page spread, of Pun Pun clinging onto Aiko. And Pun Pun asked, "Where is the island of Kagoshima anyways?" Pun Pun asks Aiko. And then Aiko says, "Pun Pun, will you come with me?" And Pun Pun says yes. And Aiko says, "You better. You promise?" And again, Pun Pun's nodding yes. And it says, Pun Pun felt like Aiko would go far away if he would let go. So he clung to her with all of his strength. And then Aiko says, "Okay, Pun Pun, but if you break this promise, if you betray me again, I really will kill you." And this is horrifying to Pun Pun. And the chapter ends on the words, "Pun Pun made a promise to go to Kagoshima with her after the end of first semester." And that's where the chapter ends. Now, one thing I realized throughout reading this, I'm pretty sure I did read through volume 2 and didn't finish volume 3, but I got through like the elementary school part of this. But again, I really only remember bits and pieces, and most of the bits I remember are from this first volume. Again, I could be very wrong too. I could have only read to the end of volume 1, and that's where this part of the story ends. I'm not very sure. But all I know is chapter 11 is next, so I'm going to stop this recording, and I'll start again when I finish that. Alright guys, I just finished chapter 10. In this chapter, we focus on, let me get this boy's name, Shimizu. We focus on him, the boy with the porno mag. And we find out that his dad's drunk and he wants to beat up his dad, whatever. And then he goes and he talks to the poop god, which is a different god than Pun Pun's god, but fills a similar role, yet he's more kind than Pun Pun's god. But Shimizu tells one of his friends that he saw the poop god and got punched for being childish, which is not a very friendly thing to do. And then these boys are kind of having a quarrel, and this boy asks Shizuyu for money. And it's you can tell this isn't a very genuine relationship. But then Pun Pun comes walking up, and they're talking about money and what they would do with money, and they talk about the porno they watched at Pun Pun's house with, that guy who said there's money in 3 dead bodies. And these kids decide they wanted to go get money, Pun Pun more specifically, so he can take Aiko to Kagoshima. So they plan to go to the miso factory to recover this money. And that's about all I have to say for chapter 11. Only one more chapter left. I'll be with you right back with chapter 12. Alright guys, I just finished chapter 12. So Pun Pun and the boys start to go to this miso factory, and they bump into the group of girls. And they're we're going on a test of courage. And Aiko wants to come with, asks Pun Pun if she can come with. And he says yes, of course, because Pun Pun's pussy whipped. As he is. But they basically make their way to the miso factory. One of the kids is talking about how he used to play there a lot when he was younger, while smoking a cigarette, which you shouldn't be doing at age 11. And they jump the fence and they make it to the miso factory. And the chapter ends with them getting inside. And it ends on the cliffhanger of them saying, "Someone's coming." And Pun Pun saying, "I really need to pee." And there's not a lot going on in this chapter for me to talk about, but I will go into my thoughts on this volume as a whole. I think The story of Pun Pun is beautiful. It's been displayed beautifully so far. I love the depiction of children in this series, especially how mentally capable they are, even though they're just children, because children are mentally capable. And I love the realness of how it's not afraid to shy away from domestic abuse and violence and real things that happens in a lot of children's lives. And I also think it helps later in the chapters that it shows it's not just happening to Pun Pun, it's happening to his friends too. And it's just a beautiful story so far, and I know it's only going to get more heartbreaking and more beautiful as time goes on, and I know I'll only have more thoughts as time goes on. But thank y'all for watching. This is easily my longest video by far, and I really hope you made it this far, and I really hope you continue to tune in for these Pun Pun reviews. Hopefully next week, or maybe 2 weeks from now, I'll have my Volume 2 review up, and I just can't wait to get further than that into land I haven't seen before. But again, thank y'all for watching. Excuse me, and have a great night.